Emma Lawson stepped into the airport dressed in a simple black suit, carrying only a small handbag and a worn leather folder that contained her mother's handwritten letters. To everyone around her, she looked like an exhausted woman returning from a heartbreaking funeral. Her eyes were red from crying. Her makeup was almost gone, and the only thing she wanted was to get home before the pain overwhelmed her again. What nobody inside the crowded terminal knew was that Emma was the anonymous billionaire owner of one of the world's largest technology and investment groups, a fortune estimated at over $50 billion. She had purposely traveled without bodyguards, private assistants, or her private jet because her mother had always reminded her, never let money separate you from ordinary people. But at Gate 18, her quiet journey took a shocking turn. The gate's supervisor, Brandon Cole, glanced at her wrinkled clothes and economy ticket before rolling his eyes. "You're too late," he said coldly. Emma calmly showed him her boarding pass. "The gate isn't closed yet. I still have 10 minutes. Brandon smirked. "Not anymore. Boarding is over for you." Moments later, a wealthy social media celebrity arrived with cameras following him. Brandon immediately reopened the gate and welcomed him with a smile. Emma watched in disbelief. "You told me it was closed." Brandon shrugged. "Policies change." The passengers nearby whispered as Emma stood silently holding back tears. She wasn't crying because of the canceled flight. She was crying because she had just buried the woman who taught her kindness, and now she was witnessing exactly the kind of arrogance her mother always warned her about. Determined to stay calm, Emma asked politely to speak with the airport manager. Brandon laughed loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You think the manager has time for someone like you?" Several travelers looked away awkwardly, while others secretly recorded the confrontation. Brandon ordered security to escort Emma away from the gate, claiming she was disturbing operations. The guards approached respectfully, but before they could speak, one elderly janitor quietly walked over and offered Emma a bottle of water. "You look like you've had a difficult day," he said gently. Emma smiled through her tears and thanked him. That simple act of compassion reminded her of her mother's favorite saying. Character is revealed by how we treat people who can do nothing for us. She accepted the situation without raising her voice and walked to a nearby seat. Unknown to everyone in the terminal, Emma opened her phone, not to complain on social media, but to send one short message to her chief operating officer. "Delay all meetings. I'll be arriving later. Also, please verify ownership records for Horizon Regional Airport." Within seconds, executives across 3 countries began making urgent phone calls. 20 minutes later, black SUVs quietly entered the airport service entrance. Senior executives in tailored suits rushed through restricted corridors while the airport's chief executive officer received an emergency call from the company's board. Confused, he hurried downstairs just as Emma was still sitting alone reading one of her mother's letters. Brandon, believing he had done nothing wrong, continued joking with coworkers. Suddenly the CEO walked directly toward Emma, stopped in front of her, and respectfully said, "Ms. Lawson, I sincerely apologize for what happened today." The entire terminal fell silent. Brandon froze. You know her?" The CEO looked at him in disbelief. "Know her? She owns the investment group that purchased controlling shares in this airport 6 months ago. Without her company, this airport wouldn't even be operating." Brandon's face turned pale. Passengers stared at Emma as realization spread through the terminal. She wasn't an angry celebrity seeking attention. She was one of the wealthiest and most influential business leaders in the world, yet she had waited quietly like every other passenger. Brandon immediately began apologizing, but Emma gently raised her hand. "Please stop." Her voice remained calm despite everything that had happened. "This isn't about my money. It's about how you treated someone you believed had none." The words hit everyone harder than any shouting could have. Emma then surprised the crowd by calling over the elderly janitor who had shown her kindness. "What's your name?" she asked. "Walter," he replied nervously. She smiled warmly. "Walter, thank you for reminding me that compassion still exists." She instructed the airport CEO to promote Walter into the airport's customer experience department with better pay, full benefits, and leadership training. Then she requested something even more unexpected. Instead of firing Brandon immediately, she ordered an independent review of customer service complaints from the past 2 years. The investigation uncovered dozens of similar incidents involving discrimination based on appearance, age, and financial status. Several supervisors had ignored repeated complaints. Major reforms followed, including mandatory customer service training focused on respect and dignity for every traveler regardless of appearance or ticket class. News of the incident spread worldwide after passengers uploaded videos showing the entire confrontation. Millions of viewers praised Emma not because she was a billionaire, but because she never used her wealth to intimidate anyone. Instead, she used her influence to fix a broken system. Reporters later asked why she hadn't simply revealed her identity immediately. Emma smiled sadly and held up one of her mother's handwritten letters. "Because my mother taught me that respect should never depend on who you are. It should depend on who others choose to be." Those words became headlines across the globe. Months later, Horizon Regional Airport became one of the highest-rated airports for customer service, proving that meaningful change often begins with a single act of courage and a single moment of kindness. As for Brandon, he publicly apologized and accepted responsibility for his actions. After completing extensive retraining and community service, he eventually returned to work with a completely different attitude, often telling new employees, "Never judge a traveler by their clothes, their ticket, or their silence. The person standing quietly in front of you may be carrying unimaginable grief, or may simply be teaching you the biggest lesson of your life." Emma never spoke publicly about the canceled flight again. She quietly returned to the cemetery where her mother rested, placed fresh white lilies beside the headstone, and whispered, "You were right, Mom. Kindness will always be worth more than billions." Standing there in the peaceful afternoon sun, she realized that the greatest inheritance her mother had left behind wasn't wealth, influence, or success. It was a heart that refused to let power replace compassion. And that lesson would continue changing lives long after the headlines disappeared, reminding the world that true greatness isn't measured by the size of your fortune, but by the dignity you show to strangers when you believe no one important is watching. As Emma boarded her flight later that evening, she looked out the window with a quiet smile, knowing her mother would have been proud, not because she had protected a $50 billion empire, but because she had protected the values her mother spent a lifetime teaching her. Back at the airport, employees no longer remembered her as the billionaire whose flight was canceled. They remembered her as the grieving daughter who chose grace over revenge and compassion over pride. Walter's life was forever changed. Brandon's heart was humbled, and the entire airport learned that every passenger deserves respect, regardless of appearance or status. In the end, Emma proved that real wealth isn't found in bank accounts, private jets, or luxury. It is found in the kindness we show others when they have nothing to offer us in return. Because the greatest legacy a person can leave behind is not measured in billions of dollars, but in the lives they inspire, the hearts they transform, and the goodness they choose every single day.